Good evening. Welcome to the Customs House here at Tamdhu Distillery for our live tasting of the new cigar malt. I'm joined, of course, by Sandy McIntyre. Sandy, great to be here at the distillery. How have you been?
Absolutely fantastic, Gordon, and it's absolutely delightful to see some people back here at the distillery with us, visiting the site, back up here in Speyside. So welcome.
Absolutely. Great to be here. And we're joined by some guests. We've got some guests. It's fabulous. Fantastic. So we've got Neil, we've got Joel, we've got Jimmy. Guys, great to have you here. I know you've spent a bit of time in the warehouses today. You're sitting in front of, one can only say, a smorgasbord of pretty much all Tamdhus. And we're going to go into a little bit about what we've been up to today, but I'm going to start with you, Jimmy. Jimmy's joined us from Hunters and Francois. Jimmy, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And you're going to bring your cigar expertise to this evening, because I know about as much about cigars as not, well,
I know
about as
about
much.
whiskey.
So, firstly, we obviously have to start off with a whiskey, which you've been through the warehouses today with Sandy, which is a great experience.
Incredible.
You've been tasting a few whiskies. Which one have you picked tonight?
I feel a little bit boring, but I've gone for the 15, a very classic example of what you get from the Tamdhu.
Yeah,
it's absolutely delicious, and I've been enjoying quite a lot of different casks today, but that's the one that stuck with me. So,
Well, I mean, a
15.
great whiskey, isn't it,
Yeah,
Sandy?
it's part of our core range, so it's just up there. It's one of the best, for sure.
Yeah, we brought that in about 3 years ago. Limited amount of that, and actually, it'll be next year. There might be an addition to the core range, but we'll come back to that. So no, the 15, great combination of those two casks, European and American.
Great.
So what have you picked, sir?
I have gone for the Tamdhu Club cask. So we were very privileged to work alongside some of the luminaries who are part of the Tamdhu sort of Appreciation Society on Facebook. Sent some samples by Sandy, and we all sat around on Facebook Live and we went through the samples. We chose a single cask, and this is from 2003. It's in an American oak cask, so it comes with all the lovely vanillins and the kind of complexity that you get from an American oak cask. And it's bottled at nearly 60%. I think it's 59.3%. So in a minute, I might add a touch of water to that. But yeah, just a great example of an American oak single cask from Tamdhu.
And I remember you hand delivering samples.
I'll hand deliver some. I'll hand deliver some water.
But what I remember about that tasting, it was a few days before Christmas, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we all pretty much agreed on the same cast.
We
didn't
did.
we?
Really?
It was such good fun.
Really good, wasn't it?
It was interaction, let's say, over the computers as it was in those times.
Yeah.
And we actually chose a cracker of a
Do you know
cask.
what? And the best thing about that was just the way that you got everybody together over a couple of drams of whiskey, all very different, all very Tamdhu, but all very different examples of Tamdhu. And it was just nice to do something together with people and try the same thing at the same time.
Over Teams, but I mean...
Over Teams, but now we're here in person.
It was the best Teams meeting I've had in the whole of this lockdown.
It was nice to get the people that are actually drinking the product
exactly.
as
I
well.
seem to remember there was at
involved in
least 6 or
selecting.
7 samples.
Yeah,
though,
there
so
was
Yeah, it was
seven.
good.
it was certainly
Tough gig.
a
Yeah,
tough
it was
one to do, yeah.
Tough
day's work.
evening.
Yeah.
What have you gone for, my friend?
Well, I have gone, really for you guys, back to what I guess we'd call the very beginning here, haven't we? So I've gone for a Tamdhu 10, the limited edition first fill sherry cask. So this is bottled at 46%. And this is really when you guys came and you were the custodians of the distillery. It showcases everything that you need to know about that first fill European oak. Big, rich, complex. First time I tried this, I think must have been, it must have been 4 or 5 years ago now. There's something so unique about that. As soon as you put your nose in the glass, big spice. Huge aromas, richness. And actually what was great today was to explore some of these casks which would have gone into that, which are probably a little older now, against some of those lighter, more slightly ethereal, but still equally as complex American oak casks as well. I mean, chalk and cheese, really.
The colour difference, yeah.
And Jimmy, what's important about that? Those two styles are in your whiskey, in the 15-year-old.
Both of those in
well,
there.
I mean, best of both in mine.
Absolutely.
Neil and
It's a good
Joel
way
in
to
there.
look at it, actually. Yeah, I like that.
Two great tastes, taste great together.
Yeah,
that's it.
Sandy, I don't really know why I'm asking you this, but I'm going to ask. Which whiskey have you chosen?
Well, so unsurprisingly, Gordon, you're right. I mean, I can't steer away from it. It is the single cask that I chose. And it sounds big-headed. It's always up there. It is my go-to special occasion whiskey. because there's not much of it, or there wasn't much of it at the time. There's certainly none available now.
It's
for
had a
sale.
lot of special occasions.
I have, yes.
I wonder why there's not a lot left of that. Yeah.
And it is the Sandy McIntyre single cask.
Right.
And that's the one, of course, that was it not awarded the best single
Well,
cask in the world?
let's not go over all that again.
It's
We've
just a
done that.
great
That's
whiskey.
history. Yeah, it's a great whiskey.
Yeah.
It is so typical of American oak, just as we're talking about there.
Yeah.
That really soft, go-to, anytime dram
Yeah.
that you can pick up and enjoy any time of the day, whether it be 8 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock
Yeah.
at night.
Hashtag drink responsibly, of course.
Yes, responsibly, yes, you're right. I mean, it just typifies Tamdhu as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
That real sherry influence that's here in the cask, so absolutely fantastic.
And the
Cheers,
tricky
cheers,
job
gents.
of choosing this. I mean, how many samples you must have had to
Yeah,
go through.
how many casks did you try? And did you know you wanted American oak, or did you just
Well,
go
there was a story the year before when we chose a cask for the distillery to celebrate our 120th year, where the team selected a cask, and it actually turned out it was a majority of the team selected something which was a European oak, but at the time it wasn't what I chose. So I've told this story before. The cask that I chose in amongst the ones that we'd selected was this single cask. So it was, I suppose, really the right thing to do the following year to
Yeah.
release that one.
Yeah,
and see
fantastic.
how we go on with it. So yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah,
Absolutely fantastic. to see
Go
you.
on,
Gordon,
what have you done for yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've gone for one of my favourite range of releases, the Dalby Alley series, I think, just up here.
Oh, these ones here.
Yeah, I went for the third one, which is that one there. That's exactly right. 61.1, I think. Something around
Whoa,
about that.
big hitter.
It's a big hitter. I'm going for the strongest whiskey here tonight. That's what just again, I think this series was
In a
created
rush.
very much with, our location in mind, very much with the spirit of Speyside Whisky Festival in mind, that type of thing. It's a
It was
great range.
part of the celebration of the railway station. We always wanted to do something around the Whisky Festival that Gordon's talking about. It's the only time of the year that Tamdhu's open. So every year, 1,000 bottles, a limited release, and it's now actually really, really sought after every time that we
Which
release
was
it.
great today, actually, to go down to that train and see the station there and see how it's preserved. And it was a little piece of history, isn't it? That
It
really?
is, yeah.
It's amazing.
It was fantastic yesterday. We actually had a classic car event here at Tamdhu as well. So we had a lot of cars from the 1960s. We had an afternoon tea in there, using the building to allow other people access to it. Really, really nice. It's nice to actually get other people here.
And that train line, the station was called Dalby Alley. It now says Tamdhu on there. 1897, the distillery was sort of founded. Was that because the train line was here already, or was the train line put in
came
place?
along in 1898, actually, if I'm
Okay.
entirely honest with you.
Wow.
It shut in 1968, in November 1968, so around 50 years
But it
ago.
must
Bit
have been a
of
boom.
this going on. I know there's going to be a train line near.
Yeah.
Get yourself down there.
The station ended up getting funded by partly to do with the distilleries and the locals as well. So there wasn't a station there originally, and it was actually the local community all getting together with the distillers to introduce it.
Am I right in thinking it was almost a direct line down to London, wasn't it?
It
You
was,
could
yeah,
connect
yeah,
to
you used
it.
to, yeah, you used to be able to get on. John Grant along at Glenfarclas has often told me that he used to get on with his father along at the next station along Blacksport. Get on afternoon tea on the train, and then sleeper off in London.
What a pleasant day out.
But, yeah, it must be fantastic. I mean, it's such a sad story to see all that disappearing.
Well, I live down in the south east of England, and if those days were anything to go by versus today's days, and it was Crossrail, it would have just never have opened. So they'd have been waiting a long time.
Controversial, folks.
For that to
It's
happen.
gone in big.
But there you go.
But Gordon, we're here to talk tonight.
Yes.
We are.
Something special, because let's not talk about the trains.
We are, and we're really here to, I think, firstly talk about our cigar malt, but we've got Jimmy here to really bring some insights into what I've spoken to you before tonight, and I'm intrigued about some of the synergies between the industry that you work in and the industry I work in and Sandy work in, and you guys are involved with in both effectively. There really are some real synergies. There really are some real things.
I think I've always known that there's a few, but going through the distillery tour today with Sandy, we both kept saying, "Oh, hang on a minute, that's like," and you have a lot of different elements to cigar making, and you have a lot of different elements to whiskey making, but essentially it's quite a simple product at the end, or it should be done well. And I mean, there's maturations, there's fermentations. And there's raw materials, which is the most important thing. I think we both agreed with that we were saying, if you take a bad whiskey and you age it for 20 years, you end up with a bad old whiskey,
bad cask,
and it's the same with the cigars.
And of course, you work for Hunters and Franco. You are talking Cuban cigars. It's a little bit like how some people may perceive the whiskey industry. Scotch is Cuban.
Yeah.
Away, there's New World cigars. There's New World whiskey. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the company I work for, Hunters and Franco, is family-owned business, 231 years old.
Wow.
Still family-run, and we are the exclusive importers of all Cuban cigars into the UK. So we do import some other cigars, and there's fantastic cigars made in other countries, but our core business and my passion is Cuban cigars, or Havana cigars we would call them. And the cigar we have today, should I talk about the cigar that you've sent to the
absolutely.
Guys?
Yes, we have sent some packs out to some people who've... the cigar specifically that we've got to go with this whiskey.
The cigar we chose to go with this whiskey, although I think one of the really clever things that you guys have done is you've made a whiskey that would go with a lot of different styles. You haven't pinned it to one particular type of cigar, which I think is absolutely the right thing to do. But we chose a medium-bodied Romeo and Julieta Tubos No. 2, which is a Morava size, so it's 5 1/8 of an inch. I think that's 127 millimeters, but I don't really.
I'm not going to argue. I don't know what you're
putting up a fight, so don't worry.
There's a lot of cameras here to record.
That's right, Jimmy. Correct.
Your reputation's on the line there.
Your maths is on the line.
It's a 42 ring gauge, so it's a Morava size, very, very popular. Lots of brands make this size, but Romeo and Julieta is medium-bodied. It's got a little bit of, it's got quite a lot of sweetness to it. It's very well rounded. It's very approachable. I think it has a slight pepperiness to it on the back end, which not a lot of people talk about with Romeo and Julieta. But what we wanted to do for today was give a cigar that would complement but not overshadow the whiskey. It's got quite a high alcohol content to it, so it will carry something heavier. And if you're a fan of full-bodied cigars, you can definitely put something like a Bolivar or a Partagas with it. But for today, to let the whiskey shine, we just bring along something just to complement it. So
work together.
It's very interesting, though, you talking about those flavours that's coming from the cigar, because it very much does match up with what we've got in the bottle.
It's interesting because going around the distillery today, we saw butts, we saw hogsheads, we saw barrels, and the different size of the maturation vessel effectively can have an influence, or does have an influence on the whiskey that's maturing. With cigar sizes, the length and the width of the cigar, does that have a big impact? The gauge of the cigar, does that have a big impact on the flavour, or is there some tunes you can play, long and thin cigars?
Questions like this because I'll talk for another half an hour about that. But essentially, the wider ring gauge cigar will tend to give you a more open draw, an easier draw. When we talk about draw, it's getting the smoke onto your palate, because there's a bigger passage of the smoke to come through onto your palate. So it's a softer, more rounded smoke. To be whereas a thin cigar arrives on a more intense jet, and it's a bit more compact and slightly sharper.
Is that gauge then not determined by how tightly the tobacco leaves are in it?
No, we decide. I mean, the rollers decide how big. We have all sorts of different sizes, and it's different brands will have a range of different shapes and sizes, and a philosophy of flavour that runs through them. But you will find that within the same brand, some Romeo and Julietas, I think, smoke slightly stronger than others because of the shape and size.
Interesting with the tobacco that goes into them. So I remember you explaining this idea of you've got your filler, you've got your wrapper, and then the styles of tobacco, the ages that go in. This is a light bulb moment for me when I'm starting to think about cask and aging and, or oak type, if you like, so European, American oak, and these different flavours that you're getting imparted into the tobacco leaf. The higher up the plants as well. There's a real similarity between how a cigar is constructed and how we talked about putting together.
We learned so much when we were talking today, didn't we?
I mean, I learned a lot. I don't know.
I did as well, because I'm not a cigar smoker. So
I mean, you have. You talk about. You have two different agricultural processes. You grow wrappers in the shade, and you grow the filler and binder underneath the direct sunlight. So the wrappers grow very long and thin and broad and very malleable. So they're easy to roll around, but they add very little to the flavour. Whereas the ones that grow under the sun absorb all that flavour from all that power from the sun and create. You have essentially in most cigars, you've got to be very careful with this, because I think it's like whiskey, that as soon as you say something, there's 1,000,001 caveats to it, and I'm being recorded. But essentially, there's 5 different types of leaf that go into most Cuban cigars. One is grown in the shade of the wrapper. Then you have the binder that sits underneath it from the bottom of the sun-grown plant. Within the middle of the cigar, what we call the tripper or the filler, you have 3 types of leaf: Ligero, Seco, Velado. Velado for combustion, aged for about 9 months. Seco from the middle section of the plant, used for aroma and aged for about a year to a year and a half. And then Ligero from the top, used for strength or structure or depth. And that's got to be aged in bales for at least 2 years.
Is that like maturation process or seasoning process for even the cask of the wood?
It's also a little bit like coming to Gordon's Dram, the Dalby Alley. That doesn't carry an age statement, and with that in Scotch, that gives you the opportunity to play with different casks at different ages. And it sounds like that similarity of using different leaves of different age and different flavour. It's all about the final product, right? It's all about
like
the
a
final
coming together. It's a recipe.
It's
Like ingredients for a recipe, isn't it? And putting the different ingredients together in different ways allows you to create different flavours.
And the other thing that when we're talking about the similarities is the cigar as a final cigar is not like the bottle. It's like what you've put into the final blend before you bottle it. If you want to keep it in a barrel for a while, because the cigar will continue to age and mature as the cigar.
Humidors
and those different leaves will blend.
And you've got to look
time.
after them, haven't you? This is the thing, in the same way that you've got to look after casks, you've got to keep monitoring them, you don't want them to go too dry, you've got to keep those absolutely right.
I'm going to ask a question there. So does a cigar continue to age in the humidor then?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
So is there an optimum time to leave it in there for?
Yes, but we don't know when. Because it depends on the blend, it depends on your personal taste, it depends, just like the whiskies, you'll say, this is ready. But maybe someone else will say, oh, well, actually, I'd like it with water, or So, what the kind of the traditional opinion, and I do go along with this, is that when a cigar is rolled, you either smoke it straight away off the bench within about maybe a couple of weeks, or you leave it for a while, because as you use water to make the leaves more malleable so that they don't crack. Excuse me. That creates a chemical change and a catalyst within those leaves, and they kind of become a little bit volatile and become a little bit unbalanced. So after about a couple of weeks, you need to leave it for about 6 months, most people say.
Sometimes that's like opening a bottle of whiskey, pouring a dram and leaving it, although albeit it's a shorter time period.
Especially some of the higher strength kind of single casks. Actually, if you pour it and you drink it immediately, you end up with quite a volatile product.
Absolutely.
Just give it 5-10 minutes, sit in the glass.
It's a living.
It's a slightly different timescales we're talking about, but it's the same thing.
But that's what I think we've been saying all day. It's similar but different.
So, I mean, forgive me. I mean, I've smoked cigars a few times, and it's not something I've done a lot of. But yet. But I think what I get also is that there's if you look at the industry, a lot of it's family-owned, like we are. There's a lot of Cuban. There's what makes the sort of product from Cuba? Why is that so renowned more than
I would say it's the terroir of the area and the skill of the people that are making it, and that's to take nothing away from the people that are growing tobacco and making cigars to a very high degree in other countries at all. But for me, I've worked with cigars for over 20 years, and I've almost only really smoked Cuban cigars during that time because of my own palate and what I choose to smoke. I do smoke, and there are fantastic cigars. What I say is, if you like non-Cuban cigars, brilliant, because we're not going to argue over the Humidor. But I mean, within Cuba you have particular regions, just like with the whiskey regions. We have particular regions, tobacco growing regions that are prized, like Burgundy, Bordeaux, and Alsace, or whatever. The Highland, Lowland, Speyside. And within these regions, you do have different characteristics.
Another of the sort of leaves that are being picked on the plant, are there certain regions which are sort of more highly prized, or the higher up the plant are the ones at the top, the sort of real prestige? How does it work in terms of those?
Yeah, these are quite complicated questions to answer.
Come on, Jimmy.
We're learning so much here. We're learning.
But essentially, all of that is true.
Right.
So, for example, a cigar that's very rare at the moment, we've had patchy distribution from Cuba because there's a rare leaf that comes out at the very top, we call medio tiempo, which is just normally 2 leaves at the corona of the plant. And we use those to make Cohiba Bejiques, which are a fantastic cigar. But they're very, very rich. And they are very, very powerful, whereas I think it's within the regions, absolutely. It's the same that you could walk down a dirt track and you have 2 plantations, one on either side, and one is incredibly highly priced, and one would be being used for domestic tobacco.
Well, actually, this is very similar when you think about casks, because each one is a living, breathing thing in the distillery. Yeah. You could have 2 filled on the same day next to each other. They're going to turn out differently, though.
We actually did that at Christmas time with you when we were selecting that single cask. I sent you 2. One
Almost
numerically one after the other,
and
the 2 were completely
They were
different.
sister casks, weren't they?
Yeah, they were.
So just before we go any further, I just want to, we've got a lot of people watching, so I just want to say, but there are actually people watching, which is great. Gordon Guthrie says hello from Cheshire. Hello, Gordon.
Hi, Gordon.
A big hello from the Aberdeen Whisky and Cigar Club. Susan Allen, hi guys, having a Tamdhu 12.
Oh,
Here we are. My first time buying one. Susan, enjoy it. I think you'll never go back. That's fantastic. Saba Horvath says, hello, Sandy and Gordon. We met virtually at the Speyside Festival. Cheers from Hungary.
Hungary. I do remember that, yes.
Lovely.
And I'm going to finish on Misha Bloom, who says, Tamdhu is the new Macallan.
Oh,
absolutely fantastic. Well, it's up to you to say that, but that's a great thing to say. So
cheers, all of you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching.
Keep them coming in.
Fantastic.
So I think what I've always, in the last few hours of speaking with you, is that I've always, I was like, this is an incredible industry. And if you look at the diversity within cigars and the blending of cigars, and that's the point that we sort of come to with Tamdhu, how we combine those 2 oak cask types, first fill, refill. The blending element of making a cigar is the bit that maybe people don't quite understand of how you blend these leaves together. Is that right?
Well, I mean, the Maestro Ligador, the master blender, is...
Like we have in whiskey.
Who will work in conjunction with the Institute for Tobacco Research to decide which tobaccos, once they've been fully matured, can be used. And particular plantations will supply tobacco for particular brands. But then we have the catadors, which are the tasters. And I don't know how you get that job.
Practice.
Lots of fun, keep on drinking the whiskey.
I think actually what happens is people within the factory, I don't think it's like one person has to smoke 20 cigars a day. I think you have different people within the factory that will be trained up.
Got a certain palate type.
It's like a nosing panel. It's like a nosing panel for whiskey.
Yeah. And so if the tasting panel agrees that the blend is on point for the brand, that's how the process goes from the bales of tobacco into eventually being sorted into piles of tobacco of the ligero, seco, velado, capote and capo, binder and wrapper, that will then be given to the torcedores or the cigar rollers, and they'll be given enough to make 100 cigars a day with that blend. And often the rollers aren't aware of which brand they're making because
it's like a recipe
within those
to
factories
as well,
they're making brands for within these large factories, they'll be making for lots of different cigar brands, and a lot of the brands have the same sizes.
Okay. Yeah. It's very similar to the...
Isn't it? Even the blending and the bottling holes and things like that.
Sandy, we were talking earlier about the 2 different main cask types that go into Tamdhu. So that's the American oak casks, refill and first fill, and then obviously the European oak. And we pulled some in the warehouse earlier. Distinctly different colours. Much darker from the European oak, much lighter from the American oak. So there you go.
Distinctly different colours, distinctly different flavours. I mean, it allows us to develop things like the 15 that Jimmy's drinking, actually. And again, we've got a master blender, John Glass down in Broxburn, our head office, and he's doing all that hard work, mixing those in different ratios of the first fills, different ratios of the refills. and then putting that up here, and then it's me that's then doing the piece that says, yes, we're happy for that to be released as...
The taster.
Yeah, so I'm doing the tasting.
The Catador.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. I think I'll get that in my business card. It sounds a bit more glamorous, doesn't it? Yeah, you know, more glamorous than Distillery Manager. But it's so, you know, the synergy's just there, right, all the way through this whole process.
And in terms of that, so we've got this incredible array behind us, particularly the single casks, the ones with the red boxes behind. You can see the colour difference between the kind of darker, more kind of coffee-coloured ones that are the European oaks, and then the ones that are slightly lighter, the American oaks. In cigars, that's colour grading is a highly prized skill, isn't it? You know, getting that selection of colour right.
I mean, when you go to I've been fortunate to go to quite a lot of factories in Cuba, cigar factories, and the colour grading is one of these things where, I mean, they are some of the most well-respected people within the factory, and they have boarded up the windows, they have a strip light above them, and they are organising, they have piles of thousands of cigars, hundreds of cigars.
From the same...
For the same blend, the same brand,
yeah.
the same size, but they organise them into piles of over 70, I think over 70 different shades and tones across a large table. And when they have 25 cigars that they think are exactly the same, they give them to their partner, because they work in pairs, who will decide which shape and size of which side of the face of the cigar, we would say, is the most attractive.
What?
So that will be facing up.
No.
And also any colour variation will be darkest on the left and lightest on the right of the box.
Oh, so there's a graduation across the boxes.
Within a very fine margin.
Yeah, it's
Then
70
they
different
go-
shades.
And then they go to the añadidores, the banders, who will put the cigars on the bands on by hand, but they're not allowed to change the order.
Quality is paramount then, isn't it, really, is what you're saying. It's quality and consistency.
The other thing I noticed, similarity, is the lack of machinery. You know, it's still done by people here, and it's still touch and feel, and you know, and there's a lot of that in Cuba too.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully we're a wee bit more advanced in terms of, I don't mean the civilization, but the Western.
But the way the tour you gave me was about the skill of the people.
It's hands-on.
It's
about quality in here
with
as
the
well.
idea of when Jimmy was saying about the 70 different shades, you could almost equate that to the number of flavours and profiles that you could get there. And so when you're nosing something, you're breaking that down maybe into different sort of groups, but within those groups you've got all these different aromas and flavours across a variety of different casks. So you're kind of almost storing a mental picture. It is a very human endeavour, isn't it?
Well, I mean, one of the first things we experience is what we see with our eyes, let's face it.
Yeah.
And even working with this cigar malt, when John Glass sent up some samples, one of the first things I was looking at is that depth of colour.
Right.
Yeah.
So Tamdhu is always only ever natural colour. So we don't add anything to change the colour of Tamdhu. You saw that today.
Why would you?
Yeah, exactly. Why would you? Yeah.
That might be a difference, because actually the wrapper, for us, the wrapper makes a slight difference as a top taste. The darker the wrapper tends to be a slightly sweeter taste, because there's sugars and oils in the leaf, and the darker wrapper leaves tend to come from further up the plant. They're the last to be harvested. You harvest a tobacco plant from the bottom up, and it takes about a month. It takes about 30 days to harvest one plant, because they take them in layers.
How tall are these plants? Are they sort of
Well, wrappers are about 6 foot. They grow a bit taller than the sun-grown ones are a bit shorter than that. But it's because they leave time between each picking in order to accentuate the natural difference and allow the young leaves at the top to fully mature.
Yep.
And so by the time they get to the young leaves at the top, they've had an extra 30 days on there. They're packed full of sugar. Yeah. When you cure those, which all tobacco leaves are cured before they're fermented and aged, that's when the sugar comes out and the oils come out and they stain it darker. So if you get a dark cigar, it's normally not a sign that it's going to be really, really strong. It's a sign that it's going to have a slight sweet.
Sweetness to it.
But I mean, you know, it's a grown-up sweetness. It's not like it's not like an iron brew. It's like a burnt molasses.
Settling into the Scottish.
I adapt this presentation for
for the Scottish people out there. Iron brew. The ones that are abroad don't know what iron brew is.
And so when you're pulling on the single cask selection, for example, when you're pulling a whiskey out, colour must play a massive part of that. I mean, we saw a very light whiskey today from a sort of third or fourth refill a barrel, but obviously we shouldn't drink with our eyes. We should drink with our palate mostly. And some of the lighter ones, as you and I were saying, we like that American oak style, a little bit lighter. These guys may be slightly darker on that. So it's all about palate as much as it is palate.
And it's also the other thing we shouldn't get obsessed with is age.
Yeah,
You know, again, we tasted something today that's quite old that we're not delighted with at Tamdhu.
Sure. And a young thing that we thought was excellent.
Well,
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But it's also for me with whiskey, and I suggest it's probably the same with cigars, but in my limited cigar experience, it's never been that because they've generally been late at night. It's occasion as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you would smoke different cigars at different occasions, times of the day maybe, and whiskey is definitely like that.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, for me personally, the first Tamdhu I ever became acquainted with was the batch strength.
Oh, yes.
Aged. No,
And
age
again,
statement.
you're talking no age statement, blend of different flavours that have gone into this, but distinct personality. You've got the distillery character there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's as we're up at batch 6 now. So batch 6 was released
And you've got,
3-4
I guess,
weeks ago.
in a way, nuances across all of those.
They
distinctly
all
built
differ,
into
and
it.
people have got their distinct favourites within that.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it's really quite interesting to see that.
So just to say to everybody watching, if there are any questions, please drop them in. A few more. Harry Davis say, great to hear Jimmy discussing millimetres versus inches.
Who knew?
A real expert on
girlfriend
that.
is
Pounds and
discussion with
shillings
me a lot.
next to it.
Geraldine Harry, really interesting discussion. Just bought the limited editions.
Cool.
Tim Franklin says hi from 2 miles away in Archiston.
Wow.
Come and join
And,
us.
Oh, don't invite me.
and Michael Blumoser says hello from Bavaria. Love the Tamdhu 15. So he's with you, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Great job, guys. Enjoy a Hoya de Montero Epicure Especial.
You should have passed that across to Jimmy to read that.
right?
Monterey Epicure Especial.
Yep.
Yeah.
Here we
Great
go.
cigar. Light flavoured, light bodied. The most popular light-bodied cigar, brand that we have in Cuba, and the Epicure Especial is a fantastic cigar.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're now going to try this cigar malt, and then we'll talk about the combination. I just want to say to everybody, we launched this last week. The cigar malt sold out very quickly online, but to those people who live in Taiwan, China, also into the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, and the US, this is coming to your market. It will be available through specialist retail. And Jared Christie is asking, will this be the start of a cigar malt series?
I would like to think it's something. Gordon, what I'll say is, I don't think we'll be doing something like this annually.
No,
That's a shame.
You expected an invite
I'll see you
already?
there next year in September.
I would say, have you booked your flights already for next year, guys? Who knows? Never say never is one of the things I always say at Tamdhu. Never say never.
Yeah.
It's exciting. It's another exciting product in our range.
exactly. And so this is it here for those who've not seen it, sitting in its box. The first thing to note, obviously, as Sandy said, the first thing is colour. Let's look at the colour of this whiskey. And you've summed up two things beautifully here, which I really like about this. Don't get hung up on age. Why would you when you see colour like this? This whiskey is all first fill. Now, that is really rare to see whiskies. First fill, Jimmy, are casks that have come from Spain, and we're going to show everybody our sherry cask story shortly. But they've come from Spain. They've had that sherry season for 2+ years, 2.5 years. They drop off the truck. We put in that spirit that you were nosing today, and they get matured. And that's the only casks that have gone in here across a various amount of ages.
Exactly that, yes. I mean, non-aged whiskey, just as we've said. And again, this exclusive use of European first fills that we've got here. So we're talking this real rich colour in the first place. And when we pick that up in the nose, you're really picking up things like, dates, sultanas, bright bananas.
Yeah.
But the colour was actually one of the things that influenced me actually in the selection of this whiskey.
Yeah.
Especially trying to match that up with the cigar.
How many
as well.
samples did you pick when you were looking at this initially?
The first, what happens is John Glass, that you heard me mentioning before, he sends up samples. So there was 3 samples that came up initially that I really didn't think matched. And I'm not a cigar smoker, I've said that already. That didn't match my expectation. You'll maybe get me by the end of the night. Who knows? Who knows?
We'll get you.
But it certainly didn't match my expectations
Right.
visually with that rich, dark colours that I would expect from cigars.
Yeah.
So no thanks, John. Go away and have another think about this again. And it was then really looking at this element of the first fill and the age side of it as well.
And what's this bottled at? now?
S-
What's the
ABV?
strength? Yeah, the
It's
ABV.
a
Yeah.
56, I think it is, if I remember rightly. 56.2. I'll probably not be able to read it now, actually.
Would you like me to read it?
Yeah, I'll let you read it.
53.6.
I knew there was a
53.
So it's,
Point.
Inches and millimetres
carrying,
again,
you've got that
It's
nice
high alcohol.
balance of
It's high alcohol.
Yeah, it's punchy and you can tell straight away on the nose. But actually, what I've found when I've tried to do pairings with cigars before, of course, pairing whiskey and chocolate or cheese, we're familiar with. I'm sure a bunch of people out there who are watching have their own specific pairings that they love doing. When I've tried to pair cigars and whiskey, I've actually found it quite a difficult process because you've got two big extremes. If you're pairing a smoky whiskey with a smoky, the inherent smoke in a cigar, you don't really know where these things are coming from, which is where you want robust flavour.
Yeah.
Do you know?
But
I
then
think
actually power and depth.
Yeah, it's the depth
absolutely.
of that
For
flavour
me,
that you want in.
drinking a smoky whiskey and smoking a cigar is like having two headphones in playing two different songs at the same time, right? It's just confusing. What you want is we've heard from Jimmy, and we're going to hear some more, about how incredibly complex, incredibly diligent the process of creating a Cuban cigar is. Why would you want to smother that with different styles of smoke? What you want to do is you want to create an environment in your palate where that works, where it's complemented. And that's why I think whiskey of this quality, the whiskey of this complexity, but also whiskey of this flavour works with a cigar because you've got two great complex flavours complementing each other.
I would say, I mean, I think one of the other very, very good ideas about this is that if you did want to smoke like the Hoyo de Monterrey Especial, sorry, I forgot the gentleman's name, you would just drop a little bit of water into that. That's what I would do.
Takes it down a wee bit.
Bring it down, it's a little bit softer. When you look at the traditional types of drinks in this country that people would pair with cigars, port, Madeira, cognac.
Got a lot of sweetness there.
Got that sweetness to it anyway, you know. So what you have is I used to do, before nobody left their house, I used to do maybe 2 or 3 of these kind of evening masterclasses with cigars and a drink every week. And a lot of, we did a lot of different drinks, whether it's champagne or what, God, you could name it and we would do it. But whiskey is the one that's come to the fore. And I think a lot of people would choose a Tamdhu because of the natural style that you guys produce. Anyway, because it's got that underlying sweetness to it, which does pair with the smoke.
Yeah, the sweetness is there, but the other thing that you actually just hit on as well was the complexity.
Yep.
So when it came down to actually the selection, moving on from the visual side of it, moving into the actual taste profile of this expression, it was looking for something that's got a wee bit more complex flavours that actually linger at the back of the mouth.
I think after we've seen the video in a bit, we'll decamp to a place where we can smoke a cigar. And one of the things I want to talk to Jimmy about is the way that a cigar smokes, because there are different sections to a cigar that deliver different flavours, different complexity. But it's similar with a whiskey.
Like a start, the middle, and the end. Really,
on the nose, the palate, and the finish. You know, there are 3 distinct areas that wash over you when you drink a whiskey of real quality.
I also want to speak to Jimmy so I don't look such an amateur with a cigar the next time. Like cutting it, how you do that. I'm really intrigued to ask you
There's
that.
a real ritual behind it, isn't there? Which would be great to know your thoughts.
I remember hosting a cigar dinner, and there was a chap sat next to me, and he seemed to be having a little bit of trouble preparing. I said, "Would you like me to prepare that for you?" And he said, "You joke, that's the best bit." And that is how some people feel. The ritual starts when you walk into the cigar shop. And taking the cigars and choosing what you're going to smoke, sitting down, choosing the right drink, cutting the cigar, lighting the cigar, all of that is part of the enjoyment.
Yeah.
Of the
That's
cigar,
lends
in
the
my
whole
opinion.
experience. Is that the whole experience?
And whiskey's the same for a lot of people, you know. I think what whiskey's done in the last few years to ingratiate itself to a wider audience is brilliant. And I think cigars are doing that as well.
But you have your favourite glass to drink it out of, and you'd have your favourite lighter to light your cigars, or your favourite way of lighting a cigar.
A prime example, when I'm at home, Jimmy, I don't drink out of a Glencairn glass because that says to me nosing, you know, I drink out of a rocks glass like that, you know, I just
more a tumbler style.
Drink out of that, drink it, you know, because I just want it, that says to me relaxing, this isn't so much.
That's a wee bit more work orientated for us still, isn't it? It's hard work though, isn't it?
Tough
I
job.
was going to say, you absolute heathen, drinking out of a box.
You can fit more in that one.
You can fit more in it and get it out quicker.
There you go, fair enough. That's perfect answer.
Also, one of the great things is that almost sort of, they call it the champagne moment when you take the cork out the bottle.
And
you
the
get the
first
noise
lumps
and
when
the
you're pouring
pour
it.
and the aroma that comes out the glass.
Yeah.
Very similar. Now, I've got a decent stocked humidor at home, which you have to look after. And one of the best pieces of advice that anybody gave me was to say, they're a bit like having a pet owning cigars.
I have to feed this.
Well, you do. You have to look after it.
Tamagotchi,
Tamagotchi. Not very often. Take it out. But it's when you take the humidor out to do that every,
So take it for walks.
Take it for walks. Take the cigars for walks. But it's when you take the lid off to check, open the lid to check that the humidity's right. The aroma that comes out the box.
We've got a fantastic humidor here.
Yeah,
We do have a fantastic humidor
here.
here.
It looks amazing.
Which was actually something that was made from the wood from Tamdhu staves. Actually, so it's
There's one of two.
One of two. The one, this one's going to get kept here at Customs House, so it's always going to be here. So I'm going to ask now, what do I need to do to look after it? So, because it's quite important to me now.
So on the inside of the humidor, you'll find this is the working part.
Why didn't all that come off even?
There you go.
But you broke
And
it.
there's a sponge in there. And sometimes you get silicone balls that will swell up, and there's lots of different ways of doing it. But essentially, what you're trying to do in here is create a little bit of Cuba. So you want the humidity to be around about 65 to 70%.
Right.
So when you go to Cuba, and I still do it sometimes now, you walk into a cigar shop and you say, there's no humidity. Because normally we used to see cigar, but it's just that's the whole country is a humidor.
Right. Yeah.
So what you need to do to set one up, you'd like to season the wood with some water 2 or 3 times. Get all the moisture locked into that wood. Spanish cedar wood normally with these sorts of humidors. Soak that in a little bit of deionized water or clear water so it doesn't build up calcium, and then just once that's soaked up, you just wipe anything that's going to drip off of that. So you don't want any moisture to actually touch the cigars. Yeah. Pop that in and don't open it too often, And maybe it depends, because people always say to me, how often do you have to top it up? And you say, well, how hot is it? How humid is the environment? How often are you opening it? How many cigars are you having it?
I'm checking the gauge and checking this basically then, yes?
Yeah, you want that around about 65. But to be honest, we have digital hygrometers in our warehouses at Hunter & Frankow, and they're a bit more accurate than these analog ones. But the best way of checking a cigar is just to feed it.
Okay. What's the lowest threshold that you want to go where, and then it starts to really dry out? And the other one,
it does depend.
Too much moisture.
It's not a simple answer to any of these, is it?
I'm loving this. Great.
I love it as well.
Learning so much.
I refer that question to my lawyer. No, so there are certain people that will, certain businesses that are very well known for long-term aging of cigars, and a lot of people that I respect will say that you should, if you want to mature cigars for a long time for cigars is probably anything 10, 20, 30, 40. I've smoked cigars that are over 100 years old that have been still
and they're still fresh
flavour.
and vibrant.
But it's when you're smoking when you're maturing cigars for a long period of time, I would suggest that you want the humidity right down about 55, maybe even 50%.
Is that because the wrapper itself, I guess it's very fragile. If you were to have too much moisture, it could easily split.
Oh, that's a slightly different issue. If you have too much moisture, they will split because they put those wrappers on very, very tight. And like a lot of things, tobacco absorbs moisture, it swells up. Of course. It's got nowhere to go. So normally it bursts out the foot of the cigar, which is the open-ended part of the cigar. So it normally swells up that way, and you'll get rips and little tears, or even just wrinkles sometimes in the cigar if you're alternating the humidity quite quickly. Yeah. But
it's very interesting.
I would say for most people, you're looking at around about 70% relative humidity for just general use. I like, personally, my cigars a little bit drier than that. I think you get a little bit more flavour from them. But that's a personal choice. And I'm kind of in a minority with that because it seems to be that people are enjoying their cigars more and more humid these days. So,
I've had the pleasure of smoking a couple from rollers that have been in the UK from Cuba at events I've been at, and when you get them straight off the desk, they have almost this spongy moistness to them. They are,
that's your new make.
Incredible.
That is because that's powerful.
I was going to say that's almost as if you're tasting the whiskey like straight out of the cask. You're there in situ. It's there, and you've got that relationship with it.
They're almost too moist in a funny way.
So what I think we were talking about it slightly earlier, but so when the cigar roller makes the cigar, you smoke it straight away or you leave it
Yeah.
because it goes through what most people call a sick period or a dumb period, where all of those different flavours are kind of jostling.
Battling with one another.
Exactly.
First
Marrying
3 years of
together.
Scotch, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So
Why we have that.
it's the softening of it, or it's the
3-year
flavour
maturation
development of it,
minute.
yeah.
100%. And then after that, they settle down and you get more of a harmonious blend.
Great.
And then from there, you know, the world's your oyster there. You can age them for... And I mean, the other thing, I don't know if it's the same with whiskey, but they can go up and down. It's not like it starts strong and just loses strength. You have a cigar, I think, oh God, that's gone. I've left it too long.
It comes back in.
And then I've got 3 or 4 in the bottom of the humidor.
Well, it
2 or 3
tends to be
years
a
later.
sweet spot for different distilleries in terms of the maturation side of things. So that's one of the key things that happens. And I guess there's probably a sweet spot for the cigar as well.
Yeah.
We're going to head outside shortly to light up our cigars and see how they work together. Obviously, this beautiful cigar and this beautiful cigar malt. But before we go, quickly, gents, your quick summary of this whiskey as a standalone, just absolutely fabulous.
I mean, I think it's everything that you could be looking for from that wonderful, rich, complex, dry, spicy sherry cask influence. I mean, it's everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's great. There's so much to give. Dark chocolate as well.
And it's
Terrific.
53.6, I think. I mean, again, I would say to anybody, add water if you ever want to whiskey, but I'm
that.
very happy with the way it is at the moment.
Gordon,
It's really subtle, isn't it?
I would say it says cigar malt on the label, and we know that it works really well with a cigar malt. But I think if you take the attitude of smoking a cigar, which for me is twofold, it's on my own, in my garden, enjoying some time alone, or it can be in a convivial space. This is a cigar attitude whiskey.
Okay.
You know,
Bit
it
of
works
me time, really, isn't it?
It works as well with a cigar as it does if you don't smoke cigars.
That's what I was just going to say.
Drink it on it.
Absolutely. So, good. Well, a couple of comments from everybody. Marcus Hines, what cigar did you prefer with the cigar malt? Well, we'll talk about the cigar that we're going to pair with it in a second. Marcel Dion, when will we open a visitor centre? Marcel, I'm not sure it's going to be in the next few immediate...
I always say never say never.
Never say never, but
not in the immediate future.
No, absolutely. Sandy, any chance of you working with Billy Walker on a Tamdhu Glenallachie blend?
Ooh, controversial.
Wow.
Well,
I think we'll keep Tamdhu as Tamdhu. It works exceptionally well. Glenallachie does their thing, works
Exactly.
exceptionally well too. So
few
complement one
hellos.
another.
Enzo Huang from Los Angeles. Great show y'all doing.
Great
stuff.
There you go.
Fantastic.
And good morning.
Can you buy Cuban cigars in America now? Yes, you can, can't you?
No.
Oh, you
no.
still can?
No.
I thought they'd got to a point you could.
It's a long story.
This is going to be on a Netflix series.
The director's cut version, I think.
There was a point
Episode 2
that you
we'll do that.
you could buy cigars and bring them into America.
Right.
I think the not the current but the previous administration reversed some of that. So now it is very difficult for Americans to buy Cuban cigars legally.
Unfortunately, they'll just have to come to England or
Scotland,
I was going to say the UK,
yes, the UK.
and enjoy them here with the fantastic Scotch
I think what you'll find is that, I mean, you have a range of cigars in the UK and the quality of cigars in the UK that's probably unrivaled anywhere. So
And of course, the
it's
Americans,
a good excuse for a holiday.
The Americans can travel here, so come over here and smoke some
exactly.
Cubans and drink some Scotch.
We can't travel there yet, but
Exactly.
we want
No,
to.
that's
We
right.
want to. Sanjeev Arora had the Tamdhu 15 2 weeks ago. In love with it. Hello from Dubai.
Well done, Dubai. That's
Dubai.
a-
Hello, Sandy.
Dougie Wiley, wish I was with you at Tamdhu, very jealous. And finally, Gordon Dallas, any good food pairings if you don't smoke cigars?
Yeah.
With this, absolutely. And I'll tell you what this would really work
Go on.
with, because when I think it would work well with cheese, but it would absolutely work really well with Peking duck.
I'll tell you what, I've got one.
Oh, yes,
Really
yes,
good.
yes,
Sauce.
Yeah, the sauce, yeah. Plum
Beautiful,
sauce, yeah.
intense chocolate brownie with it.
Oh,
Gooey, just a bit cracked on the outside.
Running out the inside of it, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to leave you with those thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to head outside. We're going to join you outside in a few minutes. You're going to watch a brilliant film about how we make our sherry casks. We're very upfront about our sherry casks. We think they're the finest in the industry, and when you taste these whiskies, they are.
We say only the best, Gordon.
Only the
is one of
best.
things
And
we talk
so
about.
you're going to watch a little film. We're going to go outside. I'm going to get an education from Jimmy.
Well, we're going to continue with that education.
Yeah.
Again, yeah.
So
No,
much
but now this one's going to be cutting and all that sort of thing. I'm very excited. So we're going to go outside. We'll see you outside in about three or 4 minutes. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cool.
Cheers.
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 Welcome back. And so we're now outside the Customs House. What a beautiful evening it is here.
Right,
No midges.
No midges, unbelievable. I can't believe it. Lucky maybe it's
Very
because
good
it's
for
September.
midges.
Oh,
Very good, yes. We've got the ultimate midgie repellent here. With a couple of questions about the availability of this whiskey. So just to reiterate, unfortunately it's sold out online very quickly, but for those people in those lucky markets of the US, the UK, Holland, Germany, and in Asia, Taiwan and China, you will be able to pick a bottle of this up from your specialist retailer, but there's not much of it. It's a limited release, isn't it, Sandy?
Limited release, yes.
So really, you know, if you want to get one and you want to smoke a great cigar with it, you know, you'll need to be quick off the bat, but you know, you'll certainly be able to hear from us about when they'll be available in there. So they'll be in your specialist retailers. I think they're being shipped at the moment.
yes, they won't have arrived yet, but they're on
Okay. Right, the education I've got.
Here we go.
I have a. Now, I even called this wrongly earlier. So, what do I do from this point onwards?
The first thing to say is that I think that there's a lot of different people who have different opinions about whether you should even keep the cigars in the tube in your humidor.
Right.
And I personally, I mean, people will disagree. My own personal opinion is you leave it in the humidor in the tube.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't even take the top off. But some people will think that's heresy, but that's my opinion. So take the cigar out.
Funny enough, whiskey's similar with people's thoughts on what you should
Yeah.
do.
Oh,
what you
you-
shouldn't
yeah.
do.
In the
So-
bottle, leave the bottle.
More similarities.
Leave some in the bottle
Jimmy,
or put it in
there's
the
a-
cupboard. Or...
Jimmy, there's a bit of wood in there. What's
Oh, yeah, what's that?
What's that?
So
Cedar, is it?
that would allow cigars have a quantity of humidity within the leaves as they're rolled and as they're put into these tubes. And if they release that humidity into an aluminium tube without that wood, it will potentially the condensation will build up and you'll get drops of moisture which would then come back onto the wrapper and stain it, and they look very unattractive. It's not really going to damage the quality of the smoke, but it's a way of allowing the cigar to breathe a little bit, because that wood, Spanish cedar wood, will absorb that humidity and also breathe it out again if it gets a little. So it's just a way of
Like a
it's
secondary,
regulating.
yeah.
It's a very basic regulating humidity.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
I think the funny thing is, I think we used to have a joke. And it doesn't sound like we're a very funny office now, but we used to have a joke that, you know, if you have two cigar smokers in a room, you end up with three different opinions, and that's and when you start working with cigars or learning about cigars, that can be a little bit frustrating. Because you think nobody's giving me a straight answer.
Yeah.
When you've worked with cigars, you get it. That's one of the beautiful things about this. There's no right or wrong, and that is
No
whiskey.
right or wrong way to drink whiskey.
You enjoy it.
It's
You
exactly the
enjoy
same
it. You're
thing.
doing it the right way.
Yes.
Although there are some exceptions, but I don't think we have time to
Okay,
to go
we would
through
say the
that.
same.
so firstly, can I ask, that's a very nice cutter you've got there.
I'm glad you mentioned that. This comes as part of the packaging.
Comes
of
part of your
of-
bottle. You get this beautiful cigar cutter.
If you have a wee look, if you've not found it yet, it's at the very bottom of your bottle, in a wee drawer at the very bottom.
It's hidden in the drawer.
Yes, it's hidden in the drawer at the bottom of the packaging. There's a wee
Underneath the
booklet about the cigar malt, and then underneath that is the cigar cutter.
So this is a classic single blade guillotine cutter. This cigar here, that's the foot, that's the head. We tell people to think of the French Revolution if they want to remember that, because you cut the head off with a guillotine.
Okay.
And when you cut the cigar, the first thing you have to do is cut the cigar, because that leaf over the top is called a cap.
Right.
And if you look at the cigar very closely, you can see a horizontal line running across that. The
Yes.
last thing the torcedor does, or the cigar roller does, is apply this cap. It does two very important things. First of all, it holds the entire cigar together. So if you were to cut too far down, you might find it unravels slightly.
Right.
It's not going to explode like a Groucho Marx cigar, but it will slightly unravel.
Okay.
So you want to be there's no need to cut it further down than that. And actually, when I say to people try and cut above that, a lot of people think I say cut on that line.
Right.
But you literally, it's one leaf stretched over
I've
the
made
top.
this mistake of going in too far,
Yeah.
and actually that's suddenly when you're trying to re-stick it down, and
Well,
it's
yeah,
a losing
exactly.
battle, isn't it, then, I think?
It's
So
just
you
frustrating.
take
It's something you
your
don't
time
need
to
to think about. I mean, one way of making sure you don't cut too much off is if you lay the cutter down flat on a surface, and then you just put the head of the
okay,
cigar
that's-
in, and then you
that's
just
Oh,
squeeze, and that's
literally,
going to.
just that small amount.
Well, that's a very thin cutter, but yeah, even that would be enough. Yeah.
Okay.
that's
So
interesting.
the other thing it does is it tells you which end to light and which end to smoke through, because when they make these cigars in triple lager, long filler, means long filler, whole pieces of leaf, basically. And what you're lighting at the foot is the the free-hanging outer part of the leaf, which is much thinner
Okay.
and more delicate in aromas. And what you're smoking through is the stem end part of the leaf. Okay. So you're smoking down the leaf, and the stem end is thicker because it's holding the leaf onto the plant.
So it's very deliberately rolled in the direction of the leaf.
Now, of course, 100%.
I've cut that much. I mean, what's probably like 1.5 millimeters, isn't it? 2 mil,
Take a draw
maybe?
on that and see whether that's all right, and just say yes wherever it happens.
Could not be more perfect. Yeah. I mean,
exactly.
I'm
going to try and do this.
I like the idea of
cut
putting it
that
on a surface there. That's very smart.
It doesn't matter if it's a little bit of an angle.
So look at the expert, the angle there. Perfect.
Brilliant.
But I've left what's that, 3 mil on the shortest part of it.
Oh.
And you just want a good draw through.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because I've had cigars in the past, when I've
No, I don't
been
need that,
to
but-
certain cigar retailers, they run their fingers across it, and sometimes you can feel knots in the cigar. So what you want to do is feel where there are no knots, so you get the draw all the way through. Or is
100%, that's absolutely right. I think when you're feeling the cigar, what you're looking for is firm but springy, and you're looking for no particular dips in it or no particular veins. And actually, sometimes the same cigar that you will reject, you go back a few months later and it feels perfect.
Wow.
So it's not the case if you feel it's wrong, oh God, I've got a bad cigar. You just give it a bit of time.
I've got a question, very specific this one, about the band. So obviously very important about branding the cigar. Is it a bit of a status thing, band or no band? Because I guess it's quite tight.
This might be a long answer.
No. So most people will accept that Gustavo Bock was a huge brand. It's no longer made. Gustavo Bock started that in about 1860, putting bands on. And there's a lot of myths about this.
The white cigar gloves.
But working with the assumption that never let the truth get in the way of a good story, and I have heard this from multiple people, and I like it, is the idea that the Victorian gentleman would be smoking cigars with smoking hats, smoking jackets, and white kid gloves. And without the band, they were getting slightly stained. And so they used to wrap tissue paper around them. And Gustavo Bock decided to do something for his customers, and then thought, why don't I put my band on it? Romeo and Julieta used to make a lot of bands. They, but that's anyway. That's enough.
So I'm going to ask you a question. So you obviously don't take that off while you're smoking it.
You don't take it off before you light it because they are put on by hand.
It's quite tight, isn't it?
Yeah, and sometimes the glue, the gomma, natural gum, same substance that they use to stick the cigar together, I believe, is sometimes not just affixed to the band, but also it kind of gets onto the wrapper leaf, which is very, very thin. When you smoke it, it loosens it all up and it becomes a little bit softer, and you can normally slide them off. But before you light it, if you take it off, you might rip the wrapper leaf.
Right. Now, I am feeling our midgy friends here, so
Well,
I think
I think
it's good timing. Yes, I do see
the
some of
next
them
question
kicking
is,
about.
I'm watching how you light it. You're lighting
So
it. You
lighting
don't
a
even have it
cigar-
in your mouth yet.
So lighting the cigar is, this is like a jet flame or a blue flame. And,
So Zippos are out.
Zippos are out. Zippos are out and candles are out because there's too much flavour attached to them. If you you imagine that some of these leaves are 3 or 4 years old. The rollers that have been trained to roll these cigars would have taken years to learn. Then maybe the cigar's been resting for a few years. You light it with a Zippo and it tastes like an SO4 cork garage, and it's a real shame. It's a bit like if I put Coca-Cola in one of your beautiful single malts.
Yeah.
Each to his own, I guess.
No.
I think Diet Coke would be the real travesty.
There we go.
Right, so you sort of get it, and you want to light the whole of the end. Would that be correct?
The idea is to get a flame. The idea is to light the entire face of the cigar evenly. And when you light the face of the cigar evenly, it will burn down evenly. Because if the cigar is burning unevenly, it's not just that it looks a little bit silly or a little bit messy. It's the fact that there's nothing working here.
Even more funny. We can't get them wet.
Can someone show me how to use a light?
It's not being able to get the cork out of a bottle.
Oh my goodness, this is book one, page one stuff, isn't it? I may have got the most sophisticated lighter in the world here.
I'm going to nick Jimmy's lighter.
Yeah, I think
That's a great lighter. It's just out of gas.
Oh, is it? Okay. Oh, I wasn't inept in
We'll pass the lighter along.
Fine.
So when you light a cigar, you light the whole face of the cigar evenly. It's going to burn down evenly. And when I'm saying it might look a little bit messy when it's burning unevenly, or you have it canoeing, sometimes people say, or you have these big sharp embers in the middle of the cigar.
It's quite
Actually,
interesting.
what you've done
watching,
is
you're lighting that there from here.
I'm lighting it quickly.
I think it's going. Yeah.
you're not getting the full blend. Because
so
some of
you're
those
getting the full
leaves,
effect.
every leaf in there
It's
has a
doing a job.
reason for
Yeah,
being
yeah.
there,
Yeah,
and if
Kind
they're
of
not all
toasting
burning
the end of it,
together,
isn't it?
you're not getting the proper taste.
Actually, you know what? This is like toasting the inside of the
That's
cask,
why
isn't it?
I'm saying.
Yeah,
It's like toasting the end
The
of
synergies just
of
never
the
stop,
cigar.
It's endless, isn't it? Oh, actually, that's not
no.
endless, is it? Oh.
Hold it up, just upright. There you go. That's why. That's why I lit it quickly.
It'll come good, honestly.
Give it a draw. You'll be all right.
Oh, here we are. Now, when the way you want this to
you not
burn
doing it?
evenly down, because I've seen some people
yeah,
where the
yeah,
ash is
yeah.
all over the place on it. I guess
Give
it's
it- go
about
on.
lighting the whole
it a
thing all the
shake.
way around, isn't it? Really?
If you like the entire face of the cigar, it should
Pull the cigar
burn
away.
evenly
There you go.
all the way down. The other thing is people say you shouldn't ash the cigar. You should allow the ash to build up because the ash will act as a slight insulator to the
okay,
embers
right.
and it will burn at a slightly lower temperature.
I see.
And humidity, which we've already spoken about, is something else that slows the burn down.
Yeah.
And the slower the burn, the cooler the smoke, the more flavours you can get from it.
Is that why so?
A lighter
so,
issue.
That's not going to work.
That's not going to work.
Without a doubt.
Try the white one.
That's all right.
Right, anyway, you guys, you experts.
It's
So,
delicious, by the way.
is it?
That's all.
I mean, you can't. Words can't really put this into.
He sorted out himself. I might have known it. Although they are the guests, Gordon. So it is only right that they.
Let me have a look
actually-
at this. Let me have a look at this one.
Oh, yeah,
No, we're going
Let's
now.
go.
So, and it's really interesting to watch because Gordon's working it right round the face there.
It's childproof is the problem.
Like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, well, it does look as though you know what you're doing. That's the interesting thing.
So the big thing here is we have our cigar, and I'd like to talk to you in a minute, Jimmy, about how this cigar develops over the way that it smokes. Because I know from being a cigar smoker that there are three distinct areas to cigar smoking. But I think the first thing to do is now we have our cigars lit. Is to see how it works with a cigar malt, because this for me is the real pairing.
Yeah,
so
here we go.
That beautiful sweetness on the nose.
It's a nice cigar.
It's almost like a top of a creme brulee note I get off the
Yeah.
off the nose on this, and then the aroma of the cigar working together. That sweetness and that smoke. Sweetness and smoke, great combination.
There's a great spice in the air though, and you've got that lovely, almost slightly cinnamony cedar note that comes off the cigar. Then you put your nose in it, and actually there's a lot of fruit here, Sandy, as well, isn't there?
Really,
yeah.
Tamdhu is a fruity new make.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we really like to see is the character, the distillery character coming through the maturation. So,
Sandy, one of the great things is when you try this whiskey on its own, yes, it's got a robustness to it in terms of the ABV. Yeah. And I always say that a big car needs a big engine to pull it through. But the minute that you pair this, and this happens with whiskey and food as well, the minute you pair this with a cigar, that ABV disappears.
Yeah, it really
This
does.
could be a 40% ABV whiskey.
yeah.
Surprising,
Yeah.
isn't
It
it?
really, really rounds it off. It's
Because I'm
incredible.
clearly not a seasoned cigar smoker, as you've probably guessed, but I even get the benefits of these two things,
Sure.
the cigar and the whiskey working together. But you three are big cigar.
What I would say is, I think that whiskey would carry something fuller. It's a great match.
okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a great match. But
Agreed.
what's lovely about it is that, if you wanted to Monte Cristo, this is medium bodied, Monte Cristo's medium full. That would
still be
stand
there.
up
It would
to
still
it.
be
It
there.
would stand up to it, and it would have
strong enough.
What would you say is the most robust cigar in terms of flavour that almost the extreme here?
I suppose probably most people would say that Bolivar is the strongest Cuban cigar.
Right.
And again, and I'm only really talking about Cuban cigars, and there are some. And there's a distinction to be made between strong and full flavoured.
Yes. Okay.
So most people within the cigar industry, I think, would say that strong is about nicotine. You can smoke a cigar without rattled with the nicotine content, but full flavoured is about taste.
That's a bit like the strength of the
Yeah.
whiskey
Yeah,
side
like
of it.
you-
so
of
that you're
course, yeah,
talking
cask
about-
strength and beyond.
Yeah, there's
To some
alcohol
people,
content.
So we
that's
don't-
so
and then
big,
actually
isn't
the
it? Yeah.
body of the whiskey, the flavours that would
Yeah,
be
yeah.
within it.
when we have our flavour chart of brands, and we're very privileged to import all 27 brands that Cuba make as Habanos. We go from full, medium, light to medium, light. That's nothing to do with the nicotine content. That's taste.
Flavour, okay.
Flavour, and that's very subjective. So I always feel like you should disagree with anything that you read about the strength of a cigar, because if you smoke it and you have your own opinion, that's how it is to you.
Yeah.
Again, we say the same thing about whiskey. so
But I
personal
would
choices-
say Bolivar. But Bolivar is a kind of a
Yeah.
you have Bolivar, you have Bahique, you have the Monte Cristo Linea 1935. You have Ramon Alonis, Partigus, of course,
Well,
which is
it's
the most
one
popular.
of those things where, again, it's about time and place. And some of those incredible single casks that you've got up on the shelf there, you drink some of them and they belittle their ABV. And it's about time and place of that. I mean, there's a particular cigar that you guys, Hunters and Franco, released a couple of years ago called Ramon Alonis 225, which was to celebrate your 25th anniversary.
6 years ago.
6 years ago, one of my all-time favourite cigars. But I'm not a heavy-bodied cigar smoker, but that is a heavy-bodied cigar.
It was actually a specific moment that you enjoyed that then.
Absolutely.
It was
100%. It was an event that Hunters and Franco ran, and I remember smoking.
event.
Oh, it was a good event. But I remember smoking it in a square in the middle of London, but also taking it home and smoking it in my garden at home as well. It was one of those ones where its robustness belittled its own robustness, if that made sense.
Well, that brand in general, and that cigar particularly, is a great example of the difference between strength and full flavour. Because you can smoke that cigar at any time and you get a very rich, full-bodied flavour, but it doesn't leave you kind of needing a glass of, a can of Coke or something to put some sugar back into your blood. I agree with you. It's
I'm going to bring you
cigar.
back to this idea of the moment and in a way, the location. And actually, I think there's something.
this is fantastic. I've got to say.
Extraordinarily
I mean, I'm
lucky
not,
now.
not even
But
smoking
to
a cigar,
drink-
but
drink
to be
it
sitting
freely.
out here with you guys,
A whiskey
sitting at the
in
distillery.
situ. I think actually there's a little bit of extra magic, isn't there? And actually, we were lucky enough. We went to Cuba, I think, probably about 5 or 6 years ago.
Well, for the
didn't we, John?
225 launch.
For the 225 launch, and actually, that's where that light bulb moment, that connection, almost like a physical thing between smoking. I couldn't tell you which cigar it was, but I was sitting down in a sort of square. It was probably about this time of the evening, and there was a real majestic moment of the flavour, everything coming together.
kind of hit you at that
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
and exactly the same way.
Stayed with you in the head.
If you're anywhere and you love,
Whisky, so
particularly single malt, it's about that terroir, it's about the place, the sense of place, the people you're with, and that moment, isn't it?
We were saying earlier that you say you get the comment from people, your cigars weren't like they were a few years ago, and we hear a lot in the whiskey's not like it was 10 years ago, but you've got to remember that the whole thing
not
that
like
you're
I was
world's
10
not
years
the same
ago.
as it was 10 years ago.
But the whole experience that you're remembering, that one event, that one night that you had with friends or whatever, is what amplifies the whole thing. And it's
Let's
all.
put it this way: the best dram you have, or the best cigar you have, is never going to be sat at a bus stop or after you've like
Walking through curries.
It's
if you're smoking and drinking in curries, I think there might be you'd probably be escorted from the premises.
And do you know what? We're so lucky to not just be here tonight. Not anymore. But we're so lucky to be not just to be here tonight, but to have the technology to be able to be connected with people all around the world.
Los Angeles,
Absolutely.
Exactly.
India, Dubai,
Aberdeen.
We're all over. We're all over. So
a few
it's
comments
incredible.
actually coming in, guys. We've got Christopher Weir, great discussion. Many thanks all. Love the Cigar Malt and the Romeo and Julieta. Marcus from Germany, great event. Thanks all. Anna and Karen White. Fantastic evening hearing more about the Cigar Malt. We have particularly enjoyed listening to Jimmy.
Well,
There you go.
Regarding
change
finest
from my
cigars, we had the
house.
pleasure of selling many Tamdhu bottles at Edinburgh Airport. So thank you.
So, gentlemen, I'm
that's very
conscious
kind of her. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, you've enlightened me.
You've given us an education.
Yeah, real education.
So and conscious of time. So, obviously, this cigar malt, as we've said, is a very limited edition. We're very proud of it. 4,800 bottles. I think I'm not, as I said, a seasoned cigar smoker, but I get the combination here for sure, and I hope you guys have explained the wonderful combinations. But what this whiskey will allow you to do over time with the right cigar, or not with the right cigar, will to be create something that you'll remember. It's that kind of whiskey. It's not a whiskey you're going to drink every single day.
Neither one of these products you rush. And
Exactly.
actually, there's so many things in modern life which accelerate things, whether it's your smartphone, your iPad, or 1,000 different channels and the internet. Very few things slow things down.
Yeah.
And a glass of good Tamdhu cigar malt, a good Havana cigar, these are things that you just stop and say, do you know what, I'm going to turn my phone off.
Savor the moment.
Savor the moment.
Yeah.
And, there's a Franz Liszt, the composer, said, a good Havana cigar closes the door on the vulgarities of the world. And what I take from that is that the world is reduced to this table, this group of friends, and this moment.
Exactly.
And that's what a cigar does, and
Yeah.
that's what a good
Exactly.
good
Couldn't
whiskey
agree
does.
more. And I've worked in the whiskey industry for many, many years, and I've had a few of those moments. There's a few of them that stand out. you know, cigars or not, and from your perspective, vice versa. But,
whiskey or not,
exactly, and that's
absolutely,
the point. But I mean, when you bring two amazing things together, you will get a great experience.
Amen.
And that's
Amen.
the thinking behind producing a cigar malt that from the casks and the quality that we can produce. So,
What a fantastic evening.
I've got to say,
I've thoroughly
enjoyed. Thank you very much.
Next
All
time
all of
I
your
try,
company, all of the crack. It just, it's great to have full back.
next time I have a cigar, I'm going to look less of an amateur. So I've learned from
With
the
a good
best.
lighter, though, yeah?
I'll make sure I get a good lighter. So I think we'll finish off there, ladies and gentlemen. We hope you've had a great evening, listening to Jimmy, listening to us about the whiskey. And I'd just like to thank, obviously, Sandy for welcoming us all to his wonderful distillery.
you, Sandy.
Great to
And
see you all.
thank you
Thanks very
to
much.
the
Absolutely
guys
fantastic.
over here. And we'll take it Slange.
Slange.
And if
Enjoy
you've
your
got a
cigar
cigar
malt,
malt,
folks.
you can still get it in your markets. So
Yeah.
we look forward
As
to
well.
hearing your thoughts on it.
Enjoy the rest of your
Thank you.
evening. Good night.
Thank you.
Good
Good
night.
night.